My name is Brenda Gunn, and I'm really pleased to be able to moderate today's event. I am Red River Métis, a citizen of the Manitoba Métis Federation, and a professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Manitoba. I'm really grateful to the Center for Human Rights Research at the U of M for organizing this event, along with partners Gunny. I practiced 30 times and then I just got nervous now, and now I'm gonna bungle it. Now I need to not look and just speak from the heart, right? Gina, Wayne, oh, I did it. I got too nervous. I couldn't do it. And of course, the WAG, Kashmak. So before we get going, I'd like to invite Dynamic grandmother Thelma Morso to come forward and provide an opening for us.
I take my water everywhere and I can get bottles all over. So I want to say bonjour, Ani. My English name is Denima Selma Morso. My spirit name is Bitwewe Benezik. I'm Bear Clan and I'm a Medewan person. I just got back from ceremonies. So coming from there where we sang, we ate, we danced, we prayed for 4 days, and into an environment when I came home to learn what was happening in the world. Quite jolting. But I'm happy to be here on behalf of Sandra Delaron, who is our team lead for Giganaway and Amananek. And I also just want to acknowledge some of my team members, Denise Cook, who was the lead on the Red Dress Alert, and Jose, who's sitting up there, our tech person. Jose is Philippine, but we adopted him. He's also Cree, Ojibwe, and Métis. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a mom, a grandmother, a great-grandmother. I graduated from the University of Manitoba when I was much older, but I did get to go to school, which I thought was a real accomplishment for me and my family. I'm the only one who did out of 9 children. My field was in child welfare, and I worked for many years mostly in Winnipeg, working with the Indigenous community primarily, and my last 20 years working at the Office of the Children's Advocate, being a voice for children, which I loved. I'm retired now, but I'm still working a little bit. I work with Giganaway, and Giganaway and Amananek, his primary purpose is to look at the 231 calls to justice that was released, 7 years ago, about? And we know that in that report, it's pretty clear about what has happened, in particular to Indigenous women and girls in this country. So I think it's really quite timely, actually, to have this forum to talk about gender-based violence, colonization, all of that goes with it. The colonization in this country started from day one when the new people started to come here, starting with the fur trade and graduating to residential schools. We have child welfare, we have the 60s scoop, just many, many things. But impacted in all of that were the women and girls. And today, as we, I guess, just look around the world and we see what is happening, there is lots that is going on in the world that impacts everyone, but in particular women, girls, the children. And so today I want to offer some words of maybe peace and enlightenment, perhaps. However, I want to say a few words to give thanks and gratitude for being here today. I'm one of the cultural workers for Giganaway Namananek. My role has been to, I guess, kind of set the stage or the place, the space where we work. Because we traveled all over Manitoba when we did the Red Dress Alert project. And we met with so many communities, and some of it was incredibly powerful. It was all very incredibly powerful. It was also really, I always see people's words when you tell your story. To me, it's a story, it's your story, and it's like almost like a holy story. It's a sacred story because you've come and you've shared your very inner feelings, whether it's about you personally, within your family, whether it's within your community, or whether it's within your country. And that it is hard to talk about. And we were able to capture really important information from our community about what they saw, how they thought a red dress alert might be important here in this country, well, first in Manitoba. So my role was to have ceremony and to support staff. And but I've been doing this for a very long time because I've been going to ceremonies close to 40 years. I celebrated my 80th birthday on February the 1st. And so I feel I've walked a long journey. I always say, for allowing me to put my footprints on this creation for so long. I feel really blessed and that I've had really good outcomes for my life and for my children and for my grandchildren. I identify as Red River Métis and non-status to Ebb and Flow First Nation. I also have connection with Turtle Mountain Reservation through my maternal grandmother, who was brought here when she was a young woman and married her husband, my grandfather. And both, I also think about my mother and my maternal grandmother in times like this, and I have seen them as being the matriarchs that we talk about today. They were fluent in Anishinaabe-Moan. They spoke their language, and unfortunately, their children didn't. And part of it is the colonial idea that it was better for us not to speak our language and that it was better for us to just speak English. And so that is what happened in my family as well. But I have been learning my language for quite some time, and Bungi to go, I know a little bit, and most of my, I can sing all my ceremonial songs in the language and do my own personal prayers in the language, and that's really important. So as I want to say, Kachimi Gwach for this sema, this tobacco that I've received today. We all have our own way of talking to spirit, however you identify the higher being, however that you understand that to be for yourself. I call him, her, I call them Gijamanado, I call them Mede Manado. I lift this to them and to the Mishumasananek, Kokomasananek. I lift this to the sacred four directions where we know that spirits reside and take care of those doorways for us. I acknowledge this most beautiful, beautiful sacred day today that I want to acknowledge as well and give gratitude that we're all here today, that the Spirit saw fit to allow us to continue to breathe. We have life. And to say Miigwech for Bimadaziwen, our most sacred thing we could ever have is life. And to be able to be here in this space and be able to listen to some important words that will be spoken. So I give thanks to that. I acknowledge that beautiful grandfather that comes up each and every day in the east. We call that Waban, that doorway, Wabanong, that direction, where grandfather comes up each and every day, bringing that beautiful warmth and light for us, so that we could continue to do the work that we do every day. But I also think about, at this time, I think about Nokomis, that one that travels the nighttime. Nibagizis Nokomis. And my understanding, and the way the old people talked about it, that together, the two of them ensures the flow of life in creation. We may not think about it, but everything was placed here for a purpose. And everything, every entity, every spirit does the work so that we might be able to live, so that we might be able to walk and do everything we do, so that we might have plant life, we might have water, all of the things that we don't think about, that we may take for granted, because we're so privileged to have it every day. So I give thanks so much. I give so much thanks for that. I give thanks to the grandmothers in that spirit realm. We believe that the water is sacred, and that water flows at the third level of the sky realm. We call it the Dewabu. I give thanks for that. I think about those grandmothers who sit in that direction, looking after all that water for us. And I think about our children, not only here, but all through creation. I think about children, and I pray that they will have food and shelter and safety, all the necessities of life that we can never say enough about how important we can be to give thanks for that life. And I also think about our people in this country, but other places, who may not have food and shelter, who may be in a place where there is lots of violence that is happening. So I think about that too, and I pray, and I pray for peace throughout the world, that somehow that we might be okay, that we might be able to think about good things rather than what capitalism and colonialism brings to the people. But to have peace and love in the world, and asking the Spirit to hear us, grandfathers and grandmothers, to hear us when we think about that and we talk about it, so that our children can continue to grow, our grandchildren can grow up in a world that is good. I am so grateful to be able to say these few words, and I look forward. I ask the Spirit to bless each and every one of you. I look forward to hearing from this panel today their words, and have gratitude that so courageous to be able to come here and share what it is you're going to share. And for all of you who saw it important enough to be here, I say miigwech for that, for taking that time. And hopefully we're all going to learn a little bit. So that's the way I want to open it today. And I give thanks again for the tobacco. I give thanks to both of you and Adele for asking for us to be here, for Giganaway and Mananek to be here to participate in this way. Ajwem Nishnam Vijanamanado. Ajwem Nishnam Vijanamanado. Ajwem Nishnam Vijanamanado. Ajwem Nishnam Vijanamanado. Miigwech, ne kanagana, miigwech. I got my water bottle.
Thank you so much, Grandmother Helma, for that beautiful opening and helping us get centered in the conversations that we're going to have today. So the format today will be conversational with myself and the panelists amongst themselves. I'm going to start by briefly introducing each of them, and maybe you can just give a teeny wave, because I'm going to go in the order on my sheet so as not to get lost, which is not necessarily the order that you're sitting. I did not coordinate the seating arrangement. So first, if we can start with Joy Chadya. Thank you. And she is a 20th century social historian whose interests are on Africa in general, but Southern Africa in particular. She is interested in transnational histories of liberation struggles, cross-border migration of labor in Southern Africa region, women and urbanization, the shifting practices in the Zimbabwean landscape since the inception of colonial rule, and Africa diaspora. Next, we have Helga Hamilton. I feel like a talk show host. Hi, Helga. And they're the health director for Cross Lake Health Services, where she provides the delivery of comprehensive community-centered health programs. She has experience in health administration, emergency management, and intergovernmental collaboration. She works alongside Chief and Council and regional and federal partners to strengthen access, continuity, and cultural respectful healthcare. She has been involved in many additional efforts within her community, but I think I'll also note that she is a grandmother, and her primary source of motivation and inspiration, which is her primary source of motivation and inspiration for all she does. We also have Olga Khamedova, who is a feminist media scholar from the Ukraine, who has been researching media coverage, news reports and crime reporting of violence against women, including harassment, rape, and murder for several years. In 2022, she arrived in Canada due to the Russian-Ukrainian war and worked as a visiting scholar in the Department of Women and Gender Studies and German and Slavic Studies at the University of Manitoba. She's the author of the book Gender Display in the Ukrainian Press of the 1920s to 1930s, Early Representations and Interpretations, in which she analyzes some of the earliest crime news reports on violence against women, examining them in the context of post-colonial discourse and trauma. And she currently teaches the course Ukrainian Feminism, Media, and Popular Culture at the University of Manitoba. Next, we have Shirley A. Robinson, who is a dedicated leader from Pimicikamak, a Cree community in northern Manitoba with a population of 10,000 people. She has extensive experience in local governance. She has served multiple terms as an executive council member for Pimicikamak, including holding leadership positions such as acting chief and vice chief. Her commitment to her community is evident through her tireless advocacy, crisis response efforts, and negotiations with provincial and federal governments. She too has a very long biography and experience working with her community, and also notes that as a mother and grandmother to 6 grandchildren, she remains deeply connected to her community and its future. Her leadership and advocacy have made her a respected and influential figure committed to creating positive change within her community. And our final speaker is Dr. Alex Wilson, who's from Opaskwayak Cree Nation and is an acclaimed educator, scholar, and researcher. She's a professor in the Department of Educational Foundations in the College of Education at the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Wilson's work has greatly contributed to building and sharing knowledge about Two-Spirit identity, history, and teachings, Indigenous research and methodologies, and the prevention of violence in the lives of Indigenous peoples. Her work in and with Indigenous communities has focused on revitalizing culture through land-based education. So I am very excited now to have the opportunity to start our conversation with the panelists. And I'm going to start by posing the question, and we'll start perhaps with you, Joy, and then we'll just pass the microphone down the line if that works for people. And so the first question for today's panel is, what are the connections between gender-based violence and war, conflict, dispossession, and dislocation? How do these histories shape, intensify, or disrupt violence against women, children, and gender diverse people. And if you could each answer that in 3 minutes or less, it would be greatly appreciated. Do I say, since it's like a talk show, do I say in points will be awarded to you? Maybe there is a new car for one of you at the end. You'll have to wait and see, or at least another cookie.
Good afternoon, everybody. So the connections between gender-based violence and war, conflict, dispossession, and dislocation. I'm gonna look at this specifically by focusing on Africa. One of the major things that scholars or people in general think about in situations of conflict where women are concerned is the fact that women are the bedrock of families. Women are the primary caregivers, right? As mothers, as people who look after the elderly. So when these conflicts, happen, they disrupt everything. The general sense of insecurity that is produced by conflicts means that women cannot do all these forms of social reproduction in ways that they are able to do them when there is no conflict. But perhaps one of the major problems that women have faced as a gender in situations of conflict are cases of rape, rape being used as a weapon of war. It's happening more frequently than we would want to hear. Most of the conflicts that happened in Africa post 1945, when African colonies were beginning to fight for independence from mother countries, Western powers in Europe, and then after that in post-colonial conflicts. Most of us are aware of the genocide in Rwanda and how many women, the thousands of women were raped simply because they belonged to a certain ethnic group. Rapes, the victims are left with scars that go beyond the moment of rape, right? Because they're gonna have children that they have to raise, and some of them were raped by men who actually knew that they had HIV/AIDS. So they were infecting these women with HIV/AIDS. So, so they are left with a disease. During the conflict, which went on for some time, it was hard for them, almost impossible to get, the health care that they needed under those circumstances. And those who were left pregnant, to have to care for those children and to raise them was very difficult for some of them. If you look at the DRC, for instance, there is a culture whereby after being raped, women are ostracized by their community members. You go back home, you tell your family members this is what happened. Instead of getting help and empathy, what they get is like, now, you are damaged goods. And some of them are chased from their communities, they end up living in communities which are created by organizations that are trying to help women that have been raped. The conflicts create situations that just make life very hard for women, especially on the African continent, where most of these conflicts are happening in the rural areas. Because men are mainly the targets of, being killed, right? So it meant that most villages are left with women and children who cannot protect themselves. And war creates a situation in which there is a licentious behavior, sexual behavior, where men with guns just go into community and pick and choose the women that they want. And when women are dealing with such men who have the power of the gun, they cannot say no, they cannot fight. And you find a lot of women being raped, and in like I said, in cases like in the DRC, they end up being ostracized. Then there's just the whole notion of social reproduction and how it's affected by war. Because to be able to care for your family on day-to-day existence, you need some form of peace. You need to be able to go to the fields and cultivate your crops. You need to be able to go to the well to collect some water, to go to the forest to fetch some firewood. All of these become almost impossible when there is a conflict. And it makes social reproduction very hard for women to carry out during these situations of conflict.
Thank you so much. As I absolutely agree with you about war and war consequences for all of us. I'm a feminist media scholar, actually displaced scholar, because we write in Canada in 2022 with my daughter when the war, Russia-Ukrainian war, started. But I'm particularly interested in how media portray women refugees and internally displaced women, because I myself became internally displaced woman in my country in 2014 when Russia occupied the eastern part of Ukraine, my hometown Donetsk, and I forced to leave my hometown and moved to the capital of Kyiv. But you know that in 2022 Russia launched a full-scale invasion, and I stayed in Kyiv with my daughter for 1 month, but we could hear all explosions. And Russia occupied the part of Kyiv region. It was so close to Kyiv, so it was a real threat of the occupation of Kyiv. So I was afraid of occupation because one of the reasons, yes, it's she mentioned it. So it's particularly because of the threat of sexual violence against me and my daughter. And later, when Kyiv region was liberated, we learned about hundreds of children and women who had been raped there, and we learned about other crimes committed by Russian military in Bucha, for example. And at that moment, for the first time, I realized that I needed to take some training in how to survive a rape. And I needed to learn myself, I needed to teach myself, and I needed to learn my daughter. And it is terrifying scene, fully realized it. But not only occupation, because now we have more than 6.5 million refugees, and 2/3 of those who left Ukraine are women. And 300,000 arrived in Canada, here in Canada. And recently, it's last week, official report by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights was published. The name of this report, Seeking Safety from War, Violence and Rights Abuses Against Women from Ukraine. And so new data about this, that 1 in 4 Ukrainian women who fled the war has experienced physical, psychological or sexual violence since the start of the full-scale invasion. And according to the statistics, that 25% of respondents experienced physical or sexual violence since the beginning of the war, and 39% in Ukraine in occupied territories. And the maturity already in their host countries. Can you imagine that in host countries they experience different kinds of harassment, for example, online harassment, sexual harassment, and even faced with negative reactions or attacks due to publicly using the Ukrainian language, particularly in the Czech Republic and Poland, for example. But the problem is compounded by the fact that the women often don't speak about sexual violence in native country and especially in foreign country. Women are completely disoriented and they are under stress, of course. And for example, I investigate Ukrainian Facebook groups here in Canada, and here posts appear from time to time, mostly from young women looking for housing, usually a room in someone's home here in Canada. And local Canadians often warn our girls that this may be dangerous and advise not to move it with strangers. And women who have experienced harassment or violence are often afraid to report it because in our society, it's a victim are stigmatized. So it's a people say, it's your fault, yeah? Why did you go live in a man's house? So maybe you provoked him. And requests for help who also appear in larger groups, such as, for example, Ukrainians in Manitoba is the largest group here in Canada, Facebook group, and it has about 25,000 members, from women who have experienced abuse from their partners, for example. And they simply don't know which organization here in Canada to contact for protection. And another reason, and they may also face judgment from their community, because it's family issues are often considered private matters that should not involve in the police. And about traditional media, such as television, often pays very little attention to these realities. And for example, I monitor and investigate the Canadian media reports, for example, news reports. And in Canadian media coverage of Ukrainian newcomer women, the stories are almost always optimistic. It's highlighting how well women have adapted here. But I haven't seen reports addressing specific risk for women arriving alone, those who have experienced abuse or issues such as, for example, age-related discrimination. So because among Ukrainian women who arrived due to the war, many are over 50, and they struggle to adapt and are often denied employment because of their age. So the most common media stories tend to focus on charity fairs organized by Ukrainian women, their baking, crafts, so it's always tied to festive occasion. But behind the sense, the real lives of many women are filled with stress, psychological, mental health challenges, because many women post in social media about depression and they are seeking for help because of harassment, because of online harassment, because of sexual violence. And they, due to the language barrier, for example, they cannot access some Canadian services. So it's a big problem, yeah. So, but it's a direct connection between war and violence, gender-based violence. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to add on my introduction there. I'm also a residential school survivor. I'm an intergenerational impact. I had to leave home when I was 14. So I'm gonna respond to your question. I'm going to respond as an Indigenous woman and as well as a frontline worker and as a politician. That's how I'm gonna base my responses. Just for everyone's information, this is my 18th year in leadership for my community. I'll be fulfilling 6 terms in office. So as an Indigenous woman who lives on the land, I see the connection between violence against women and violence against land very clearly. When land is taken, when communities are displaced, when governance systems are disrupted, that instability affects women first and hardest. Our relationship has always been connected to our relationship with land, family, and community. As a frontline worker, I see what happens when people are forced into instability. Whether through poverty, housing shortages, wildfire evacuations, or colonial policies that have disrupted our communities for generations. When these foundations are shaken, vulnerability increases for women, girls, and two-spirit people. And as someone who works in politics, I see how these conditions don't just happen. They are shaped by decisions about land infrastructure and resources. For me, gender-based violence can't be separated from colonialism or dispossession. When systems treat land as something to exploit, they often treat women the same way. Protecting land and strengthening communities and restoring Indigenous governance are all part of preventing violence. And that's the way I see this, what's going on with all this violence that's out there. But I will add more as I continue with the next responses. But these are what my feelings are. This is what I see, and I'm openly sharing it. Thank you.
Gender-based violence. Something I want to. My answer comes as a grandmother, because I talk about, to go back, all my life is based on assimilation, colonization, and my auntie, she really shared a lot of what it was like. You know, today I say that's the greatest form of Stockholm syndrome, because we are, my most hurt comes from my own people, not other races. It comes from my people, about my ceremony life, you know, because we're supposed to be church people and not, that's where I mean Stockholm syndrome, and that violence against, like, gender-based, because our people we were not patriarchal people. It was our women who had these roles. It was our women who were the leaders of community. It wasn't men. And today, if you take a look at our communities, it's men. Majority are men, chief. And no disrespect to men. I don't want to say, you know, make that clear. And then a friend of mine, and he was talking about, just recently, he said, I'm gay. I have one spirit, I'm gay. My most hate comes from our people and our church people, because he grew up in a church family, and he was talking about all of this, and it's our people. He said, and I want to make sure that I do my best, because I want to teach my grandkids. I hope they don't have to live the harms that I've had to, that my mom or my grandmother, or, you know, that we did. But if you go back to what we're facing, it's because of that assimilation and colonization. I said, they taught us, they took away all of this, and, you know, today we're going down that path. I said, and we need to get back our roles. You know, I'm all about whatever path you walk spiritually. I'm like, hey, I'm at this point in life, that's your choice. Just make sure you're a good spiritual being, because your human experience is very short. I said, but our spiritual journey, when we enter that from the spiritual realm to begin this human experience, I said, it's not long. You know, walk gently, love fiercely, be kind, teach, leave something behind that helps someone. For me, it was, because, when you were talking about language, my auntie said that, you know, her final thing was the nuns pulled out her tongue with pliers and sliced it 3 times with a razor blade, because she kept getting caught speaking her language. And she said that was the final time she spoke her language. until much later in life. She said she never taught her kids. And I think of that. How many of our children, we don't teach the language anymore. I'm one of those people. I said, that is assimilation and colonization. If your children don't speak the language, if you don't, if your grandchildren don't speak it, that is colonization and assimilation. That, and it goes back to all these things that we used to do. And I keep saying that in our roles as when we were the decision makers, when the power our people had, and I say power in a good way. And for me, for teaching my grandkids, because I say the most harm comes from our own people. I said, and I don't say that as an insult, I say that because that's how we need to heal. And for us, it's ceremony. I want them to be able to go to ceremony, and I'm happy to see one of she's a teacher, she's a band member, but she's also our Sundance carrier, her and her husband, for Cross Lake to have that, because they don't have that. And, all of this where the healing comes back, and if we can get back to that, and it'll help heal, because being displaced, you become vulnerable. The violence that happens to you, I've watched it for the last 2 months, and again, I say most of that comes from our own people, though. Who are the drug dealers? Our own people. Who are killing our own people at the highest rates ever. And I said, that's where I want to talk about healing. And I said, I wish we could just erase all of that with some magic brush and go back to when we had our matriarchal society, because that's, I think, most Indigenous societies were that way. And prior to contact, you go back that far, we didn't have all of dysfunction and violence, and we lived in harmony. We lived off the land, because that's where healing comes from. I said, having that balance, I said, for me, and I feel it's our ceremonies that will help us heal. Just teaching them. I said, because I have to teach safety. I have to teach safety to my grandchildren against my own people, within my own community. I said, but where did that come from? We weren't like that. Yet on the flip side, we're some of the most loving, oh my goodness, helpful people that would give you the back of their shirt off their back. I said, so having to undo those, because I thought when I was listening to you, and I thought, oh my God, your own people, that's the same. It doesn't matter the race. I think that when we're in this kind of conflict and displacement, and it happens. It's so similar, yet it's oceans away, and it's still very similar. Thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking about what you were saying, and also, when did patriarchy start impacting our people? Like day one of colonization, and all of that was linked to the dispossession of land or the taking of land. So these questions that were posed to us, I think they've been questions for a while, since day one, that everything is interconnected. And Virginia Woolf in 1938 wrote about it in 3 Guineas. Like, what would the man asked her, well, what would women do? And she said, well, there wouldn't be war, if women were ruling. And in there she acknowledged the interconnections of all of these systems of institutions and how their power interconnects to form oppression. And fast forward to 1991, and Susan Flutie talked about a backlash, which was like an unspoken war against women that was caused by the media, or that was promoted by the media. And then if we think back to 2012, when Idle No More was started in the prairies, we saw that happening as well, a backlash against Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people. And fast forward to now, we're seeing the same kind of political, spiritual, and practical kind of impacts on groups that are most marginalized and oppressed. And so I don't call it a backlash, I refer to it as a whiplash. Because if you think about a whip, the most targeted pain is at the end of that whip. And so today we see that happening in our classrooms, in our schools, in our institutions, impacting trans kids, for example. Why do they bear the brunt of all of history onto them? Why would that third grade trans kid be the target of everyone's aggression? And so to go back to answer that, you have to unpack how these systems that we've been talking about all work together. They collude, and they're all under the big umbrella of heteropatriarchy, which is supported by organized religion. So I guess that leads to our next questions. And how do we undo all this? For me, it's like, let's go back to Indigenous knowledge or center Indigenous knowledge.
You are right. The next round in 3 minutes or less, how do we stop? No. I think along the lines of solution, I really appreciate these questions, and I should note that I did not think of them. They're much smarter than I could ever come up with. But I love this question because it's about love. What does it mean to love in difficult times? How do different kinds of love, whether for children, the land, community, or between us, help us resist gender-based violence in all its forms? And Shirley, do you want to maybe start us? Well,
Okay, what it means to love in difficult times. For me, love starts with the land. Living on the land teaches us responsibility. It teaches us that everything is connected. The water, the animals, the people, and the future generations. As an Indigenous woman, as Indigenous women, we carry a deep responsibility to protect those relationships. Loving our children means fighting for a world where they can grow up safe. Not just from individual violence, but from the larger systems that create instability in our communities. Love also means showing up for each other. In the work I do in the front lines, I see how important community care is. People checking on one another, supporting families, and refusing to let people face harm alone. And in leadership, love means making decisions that protect future generations, even when these decisions are difficult. So to me, love is not passive. It is responsibility. It is protection. And it is resistance. So that's my response to that question. Thank you.
We'll just start the circle. Piece of mics. Love. That's okay. What does it mean to love in difficult times? How do different kinds of love help us resist gender-based violence?
What does it mean to live in difficult times? Well, I've been in difficult times ever since I can remember. But today, for me, it starts with me. And for me, it's about taking care of my spirit. And I always teach my grandchildren to take care of your spirit, because your spirit is connected. We hear about water is life, land, all these aspects of life. And your spirit, I said, it's more important to feed your spirit than it is to eat and drink food. I said, because when you take care of your spirit, that's where that love is. You have that love, that self-worth, that feeling good. When you feel good, then you're able to be kind. It makes life easier. And so for us, we start our day self-love, smudging, things like this. I'm able to do this in my office and things like that. I said, because it is our connection to the land. And that's so important because that's in our ceremonies. When we do placenta, walking out, and all of those ceremonies, they are connected to the land. Everything about self-love, about love, self-love starts here. All of this. I said, because again, we're all spiritual beings on a very short human experience. So when you make sure to feed your spirit, it helps this human journey because we see all of this. We see the conflict all over the world, in our backyards, in our own families, in our own workplaces, wherever we go. I said, and having that self-love and teaching that, passing that self-love, and healing these systems, breaking these, for me it's colonization and assimilation, those policies, throw some love in there and let's change all of that.
I was thinking about some of our, I guess our legal scholars would call them natural law, but our just ordinary folks would just call them the way that the nature and the world works. And we have descriptors of those in our Cree philosophy. And those are kind of the guiding principles that people have followed since we weren't even people, since we were energy. And those kinds of ways have been described and come from the land. And so I think it's very easy to think about or feel what love actually is. And there's been so many intentional policies and practices that have tried to sever us from those systems that are all about love. And so to go back to our language, which comes from the land, and some of those principles, they really describe love in action. And I know that sounds romantic and simple, but sometimes, that's really the way that we have to invert hegemony by giving voice to those who are often the most marginalized. So turn things upside down and recenter things that fit with the land here and fit with the people here. And then everyone will benefit from that.
Okay, love. They say love makes the world go round. Love is that intense feeling of deep connection for someone or some people, involving compassion, understanding, support, and is often expressed through kindness, presence, care, respect, and many other ways. But what does conflict do to love? Because peace is the bedrock for love. You are able to express it and to receive it better when there is peace. Think about a family, for instance, even here in Winnipeg, in a family where there is always conflict, right? Even when the parents love their children, the way that they receive that love is different from when there is peace between the parents. It's the same thing in our communities, in our countries, and different parts of the globe. Conflict just disrupts societies. And when there's disruption, love is affected. We talk about love languages, right? The way that people show and demonstrate or express love are different. Touch, feeling, providing, protecting, all that is affected by war, by conflict of any kind. That when we are in such a situation, it is very hard, for love to happen in a way that makes it easier to be received or to give it. But at the same time, war or conflict does not mean that love is gonna die. I came across, when I was doing some research, I came across situations in which young men were traveling, walking really in the rural areas of Zimbabwe, walking long distances to see their girlfriends. Even in areas where there was fighting going on, they were risking their lives to go and see their loved ones. And some of them ended up dying. But love continues even under very difficult circumstances. But it's always better to have it, when there is peace. And love, especially, in conflict situations like a war, love is often expressed by men by protecting their families. So when you have a conflict like you had in Rwanda, for instance, or in the DRC, where men were forced to watch as their daughters and wives were being raped, you can imagine what that does to the men, the humiliation that they cannot protect their families. So sometimes, that failure to provide the protection, the love, it leaves scars that continue into the period even after the war is over. Then you can also think about how when you're thinking about conflict in the present, for instance, you find that there's a lot of use of social media where people who are very far away from where the conflict is going on, like we have the situation in Ukraine, for instance, people can go on social media, Instagram, Facebook, or other forms of social media, and send messages of love. So these new ways of communicating are also providing other means of communicating and sending love to total strangers, right? And it makes the world a better place to have that someone that you don't even know sending that message and saying, hey, hold on, hang on, it's gonna get better. It gives hope to people who are otherwise in a hopeless situation. And then there's also love, and I'm thinking here about conflict situations in Africa where Africans were fighting anti-colonial wars, where neighboring countries giving refugee status to people who are in conflict areas meant a difference between life and death. Just being allowed to cross the border into the neighboring country gave hope to people. That kind of love, again, from a country that is not yours, from people that are strangers, meant that a lot of people were able to survive, the war, into independence. So love comes in all kinds of, shapes and forms, and from people that we might never expect to find love. And when it's given, it makes a huge difference in any conflict situation.
Yeah, I agree with you that love overcomes war and death, and this is a core idea of my exhibition, Love Letters, a Timeless Experience, which is currently taking place at Osredok, Ukrainian Educational and Cultural Center. You can visit this exhibition now. It's not far from here. It's on Alexander Avenue. It's opposite the Manitoba Museum. So we created this exhibition with our amazing Winnipeg Toronto team, and it's because there are many emotional moments in archival work, and maybe the most touching for me was the finding letters which were published here in Winnipeg newspapers 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And these letters were written by Ukrainian wives who stayed in Ukraine, but they wrote to their husbands who were working during the First World War. And so the idea was born about the connection of three realities: the reality of the First World War, the Second World War, and now the Russian-Ukrainian war. So I wanted to combine these realities and display different letters, different modern messages from different social platforms and social media in one reality, in creative reality. So in this project, I express my love and gratitude to the previous generation of newcomers, previous generation of Ukrainian immigrants in Canada, and express my love to the Ukrainian community now in Manitoba, and to our Winnipeg, because our Winnipeg is amazing city. Maybe you can imagine it, but I maybe it's a newcomer here, and I see that it's so multicultural city. This is so beautiful because it's multicultural city, because it's so many communities, and you are live and you are coexist so peacefully here. It's a real life full of love. So my advice is to do what you know the best, what you can do the best in our life, for your community, for your land, for your people, and serve and know and learn about the experience of previous generations. Yeah, and learn from indigenous community to learn this experience, because they feel so deep connection with your soil, your land. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last question brings us to start thinking about the connections between happenings globally and locally. And so last year, we have seen so much happening globally and locally. The list goes on. They included a short, depressing list here for us. The ongoing wars in Palestine, Ukraine, DRC, and the Sudan. There's the evacuation of more than 21,000 people in Manitoba, overwhelmingly who are Indigenous peoples due to the wildfires. The repeated dislocation of Pimicikamak due to the wildfire, and then ongoing failures of infrastructure. The occupation of American cities, including Minneapolis, by American Border and Immigration Control. And so my question, given these events, what are the connections between these global and local histories? And how do these events then ask us to think differently about gender-based violence, including the ongoing genocide of MMIWG2S+? Alex, we're going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that's happened globally and historically is whenever you have genocide, there's something else happening, and it's the severing of knowledge, land-based knowledge. And so everyone who knows the term genocide should also know the term epistemicide. So that's the killing of knowledge systems. And we know it happened during the witch trials. We know it happened with Indigenous peoples. We know it's happened during the Holocaust. We know it's happening currently, and it's happened historically all over the globe. And so what's the answer to that? Well, to me, the answer is like reconnection with land and understanding what that means. So cosmology, it's linking to what is our place within the wider universe. And that's why our spiritual people are so important. That's why our ceremonies are important, because that's a time for us to connect to outside of our bodies, to our bigger place within the universe. And how many of you saw the full moon? Mm-hmm. So don't forget to look up. And also, how many of you know where the constellation Winnipeg is, or Orion? Take a look for that one in the next couple of weeks. And Winnipeg is a really important constellation for us as Swampy Cree people, because it's part of our creation story. Winnipeg, if you break down the word and into parts, the last part means achak, which is your spirit, but it also is a similar word for star, achakos, star. So there's a connection between our spirits and everything. The first part is like a sour or wayward, and then the middle part is love. So there's an understanding in our worldview or cosmology that the thing that's allowed us to be is love. So there's a continuity of energy that's existed since the beginning of time that's allowed us to be here. And so to return to that, or to recognize or validate that, to me, the future is queer. And when I say queer, I mean the verb queer, but also the noun. So what does that mean? What does it mean to be queering something? I refer to my friend Kalani Young, who's a Kanaka Maoli Hawaiian trans woman, and she says that queering is transforming poison into medicine. And so if you think about all the poisons that we've been talking about, war as a poison, literally, violence, epistemicide, killing people, genocide, and even violence within our own communities against one another. All of those are forms that are part of colonization around the globe. Heteropatriarchy is the poison. And so how do we transform that poison into medicine? Often it's been the bodies of women or the bodies of queer people who have had to do that, not by choice, but because we're the ones that have been in the position spiritually, or in the positions just because we're there, or because of all the different forms of oppression. You have a different understanding of the world. If you think about all these little Venn diagram circles for queer people, often Indigenous queer people, we're right in the middle there. So we have the experience and the knowledge to figure out how to digest all that and spit out something beautiful. If you've ever been to a drag show, like, where does that come from? That often comes from pain, it comes from experience, it comes from knowledge, and it's transforming something really ugly into something really beautiful. So this is the challenge, I would say, for myself and for all of you, to think about how you can queer. You don't have to be LGBTQ, although you're welcome, but to think about how you can queer your own actions, or if you know, in your family, how you can speak up and kind of shift things around, turn things around so people can have a different understanding. And sometimes just moving over one seat, you can have a completely different understanding of the world. So I think that's what I'd like to end with.
All right. All these international conflicts. When I saw this question, I immediately thought about a conflict that happened in Sierra Leone over gold, diamonds, where militia, young youth were being sponsored by external forces to mine the diamonds and the gold, and it led to conflict because the government wanted to control the minerals, and then you have these militias also wanting to control the conflict. So there was a meeting of the opposition leaders and the government in the capital city of Sierra Leone, which is Freetown, and they were locked in the room for the whole day. And when they were about to leave around 6 p.m. without a solution to the conflict, without an end date for the conflict, women, word was just sent around Freetown, and women went to the building where these men were making these decisions, deciding on what to agree on to end the conflict. So they just decided to go to that building and took off their clothes. Yeah. So nudity has become a thing as a form of protest. It have become a thing. And those of us who know African culture, seeing a mature woman in their nude someone, that would be like looking at your mom, basically. And seeing these women take off everything from their bodies and threatening to walk into the room where these men were making these decisions. Then they were just like, okay, we're gonna sit down and we are not leaving. We are not leaving until we come up with a date on which the conflict is to be ended. And that started a movement. In fact, nudity had always been used by African women as a form of protest, but this was the first time it had been used for national issues. It used to be that nudity was used in familial conflicts, because like what son would want to see their mom naked, right? So this was the first time that African women had used nudity as a protest, and they were like, we are tired of the war because the people who suffer the most are the women, as they have to take care of the children and the elderly, and there were no means to do that. So from that time on, nudity was used in Kenya, nudity was used in South Africa. It became a protest that leaders, the protest, the kind of protest that most leaders are very quick to respond to. So that's one. And then I was also thinking about gender-based violence, and thinking that I think over the years, women have come to the conclusion that this is not something that women can do alone, fight alone. They need men to help them fight. Because when you're talking about gender-based violence, who is doing the violence, right? It's largely men. So when women are fighting alone, without having a dialogue with the people who are perpetrating the violence, then how is a solution going to be achieved? And over the years, particularly across the African continent, women have also come to the conclusion that, stopping gender-based violence begins at home. Don't wait until that son is married and he starts beating up his wife. Start at home and talk to the son about how it is wrong to beat up his wife or to beat up his sister. So it has become like community-based. One of the things that community-based organizations are doing across the continent to enlighten and to essentially to have a dialogue, not just between men, but even between boys and girls. Because it's the same boys and girls who are seeing their mom being beaten, and they grow up, they think that's the normal thing to do. So, one of the solutions to this gender-based violence is something that begins at home. In African communities, back in Africa, when a woman is about to be married, other women, they have bridal showers. Bridal showers back in Africa are essentially about teaching or informing a young woman about how to behave in a marriage. But there are no similar showers for men. And this is something that, again, is being talked about, and people trying to find solutions for that by engaging with, so that it doesn't become a one-dimensional kind of solution, because when it remains one-dimensional, when the other part that is involved is not there, you don't really get a solution, because women get equipped about what to do, but when men don't get that kind of education, then the desired results might not be achieved. Currently there is also the use of social media, which has made the globe a global village, really. Because something can happen in South Africa, like right now, and we will know about it as it is happening. So that, and people have begun to use, women and men both, use social media to improve relations, not just between, communities, but between genders, between countries. People in the United States can be protesting against the treatment of women in a country that they've never been to. I can give an example of chloridectomy, for instance, where some communities in Africa have the practice of removing the clitoris, young girls, and they protest from across the globe, particularly Western countries, helped introduce some changes. So that expression that it takes a village, and now that village is global, can really work wonders in reintroducing peace in communities, whether at a village or country or international level.
Thank you. I do know we're almost at time. I do want to give our remaining 3 speakers an opportunity to respond to this question. So I understand if people have a need to leave, but I do hope we'll be wrapping up in sort of the next 5 to 8 minutes, if you can bear with us. Otherwise, if you can quietly, as possible, sneak out like a little mouse. But Olga.
I want to continue the previous thought about our connection. So I believe that people don't fully understand that our world is so small. It's actually very small. It's a very global event. Immediately affects all local communities too. So that's why I think that Winnipeg, as a multicultural city, where representatives of all ethnic communities and different religions, different genders can coexist so peacefully, maybe should set an example of how to address these challenges. And perhaps we as Winnipeggers are among the first to face such difficulties, but we are also among the first to accept this challenge and learn how to solve this problem. So we gain experience now, and if something is good.
How much do I have?
We are here till you are done.
Okay, my response to that question is that, like right now, we're seeing crisis everywhere. Wars around the world, climate disasters, and displacement. And here at home, we are also seeing wildfire evacuations in Manitoba and the repeated displacement of communities like my home nation of Pimicikamak. These events show us that certain communities are still living with the consequences of colonial systems. When people are repeatedly displaced from their lands, it affects safety, health, and community stability. That is also why conversations about gender-based violence must include the ongoing genocide of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit. Those disappearances are not isolated. They're connected to land exploitation, infrastructure gaps, and systems that have historically failed Indigenous women. As someone who works both on the land and in leadership, I believe solutions must come from strengthening our relationship with land, restoring Indigenous authority, and ensuring our communities have resources they need to keep people safe. Safety should not depend on whether a community is politically visible. Every life should matter equally. If we truly want to end violence against Indigenous women and girls, the Two-Spirit, we must also end the systems, how our systems treat our lands, our communities, and our lives as expendable. When we protect one, we protect the other. And that's the future we should all be working toward. Thank you.
I'm going to give a totally different answer from what I initially had. And Alex had mentioned it earlier about, you know, some of what we talk about might sound like we're romanticizing. But when we go back prior to colonization, assimilation, and I think, you know, I was just chatting with her about us being star people and how we came from that, knowing our constellations, that history. If you ever get a chance to listen to Wilfred Buck, go see him, go look him up. You know, it's really good what he does. He has different topics on that. And it'll teach you about where we came from, where our people came from. And I think of that, you know, going back to that and how, when, as I said, when we are on that, in that spiritual realm and we come to make this human journey, and our people used to know, and I'm thankful for the ones that I got to talk to before, and they said they knew, they could identify. It wasn't Two-Spirit. It was there was a different word for it it was, that's more of a colonized or whatever recent term of that. I said, but that identity, our identity, we knew. They said our elders knew our identity, whether we were and how we were to walk. And they said there was different ceremonies, and the ones we know now acknowledge today is the Two-Spirit. She said those were the ones who were seen as gifted. They had different gifts from whatever I would have had. That's what it was taught to me about that. And, you know, there was no shame. There was no, you know, the terminology we use today to shame our people. And I think love is love. Like, I don't care if I'm here or Africa or New Zealand. If we cut ourselves, we all bleed the same color. It's as simple as that. And the world needs to remember that. You know, it really is. I think of how for my life, it's always, I keep it with ceremony and walking that walk. And why I had my phone out was not to be rude. And I wanted to show, and I was thinking, and that was where this came, and I thought, you know, where I live, that's my backyard. You know, I get to see this on a regular basis. And, you know, that's my connection. This is the Northern Lights, you know, and I think where we are, and I get to see this all the time. And I just love it. The full moon ceremony, you know, these things, and about, because when you fast forward to today, to all of this displacement, for me it's displacement and the violence. And, you know, and I think for me, again, it's these patriarchal society that we have, these systems of patriarchy. And, you know, women were barefoot and pregnant. That was what we were supposed to be. And that was it, our existence. And, you know, if you learn the history and how history has damaged us. And I was, even when she said, I was just thinking, it clicked, like when she was talking about the marriage, when we have like, what do you call them again? Showers, yes. You know, and I was like, I've been to bridal showers for the women, and what do women get? Cooking, cleaning, household items. And what do the men get? A night out of drinking and strippers. I don't know anything different. I mean, if there is something different, please enlighten me. But I think that no matter our society, I'm like, oh my God, you know, you think where this has come from and how we as women have to be the biggest game changers of those systems. We have to be the ones to be part of that healing. You know, and you mentioned it about peace. And how do we get peace? Love. And love is love. You know, whether I'm a man, a woman, if I'm gay, lesbian, you know, it doesn't matter. You are a spiritual being. It's as simple as that. We all have a spirit. And when you take care of that spirit and love, and you know, but the world has corrupted all of that, and it's constant fights. You know, as we said, like we were chatting about romanticizing, I wish it was as simple as I wake up and I get to do this, and it's not. We have to break all these barriers down, and it's like a constant fight. It's like a constant, you know, and the education that has to be out there, and you know, I'm thankful for people like Alex putting that education and constantly enlightening people. And you know, I'm reading Sylvia McAdam. She let me read her. She's doing a thesis right now, so I'm going to be reading that. She's a good friend of mine, and you know, the work that they do to change these systems and break these barriers, because it's constant, but it starts with us. It doesn't matter. I don't care how you identify, where you live, what race you are. We are all spiritual beings. And if the world could remember that, you know, that we all bleed the same color, I think that would be such an easier way to obtain peace. But why are we fighting? For the resources of the land. You know, and it comes back to, and then what happens? The destruction of water, the destruction, which displaces us, makes us vulnerable, and puts us at risk. You know, and it's this vicious circle that just keeps going round and round, and it has been for centuries and centuries. And it's like, but remembering that Shirley's distracted me, sorry. It's as simple as that. I'll just end there.
I think we can make this round of applause a little bit warmer for these amazing speakers who shared so much. I'm going to keep the wrap up as short as possible. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our organizers, and thank you to Grandmother Emma for opening, and yet again, just thank you to our wonderful panelists. My pen wouldn't write fast enough. So many brilliant moments that are making my heart very full today. So thank you for sharing everything with us today, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day. Grandmother, did we need to close? We are good? Okay. We are dismissed. Have a great day.